There's something happening right now in Europe that could threaten your right to cruelty-free cosmetics. Already, some companies have started testing on animals again. How to make sure your cosmetics are all cruelty-free, and how you can fight to keep your favorite cosmetics cruelty-free. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights. Brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, the European Union has gone backwards. A new law is making companies retest products and ingredients used in cosmetics, even though some have been tested years ago and have already been deemed safe. The European Chemicals Agency simply wants a duplicate set of tests under what is called the new REACH law, but it means thousands of animals will be killed, and it even threatens your right to cruelty-free products. You can find out which company's products are still good by going to the PETA app, Beauty Without Bunnies. PETA also is spearheading a drive to stop the renewed testing, but it will take 1 million verified signatures by EU residents from around the world. It's the best chance to reverse the new testing. PETA UK is observing the situation even though the UK is no longer a part of the EU, but the EU's redundant testing can put a logjam on ingredients and products, something that could destroy the momentum of the growing cruelty-free cosmetics industry worldwide. At the end, we'll tell you how you can join in the fight. For now, here's my conversation with PETA UK Science Policy Manager, Dr. Julia Baines, who will explain how this bout of unnecessary testing came to be and how you can stop it on the PETA Podcast. You've seen it all. You've seen this issue evolve. It's a campaign that PETA US and UK pretty much has already won, right? PETA US's list of companies that don't test on animals has more than 5,000 companies. There are manufacturers that already know that consumers don't want their shampoos, their cosmetics. They don't want all that kind of stuff tested on animals. And even new test methods have been developed. And now this is happening in the European Union that affects consumers all over the world. So why, Dr. Baines, is this happening right now where, why is there this threat to cruelty-free cosmetics?
Well, maybe I'll take you back to the beginning of the story, because it was 2004 that the EU brought in a ban on testing cosmetic products on animals. 5 years later, followed a ban on testing the ingredients on animals. And then it was in 2013 that we had what is known as the EU's cosmetics regulation that brought in the full final finished product, which was a regulation to essentially assure that no more animals would ever suffer and die for the sake of cosmetics. So there'd be no more testing, and also a marketing ban to make sure that these products and the ingredients that have been tested on animals also couldn't be sold within the EU. So like you said, we thought we'd won the battle. And yet it was 1 year later, 2014, just 1 year after that cosmetics regulation was implemented, that the European Chemicals Agency and the European Commission introduced a policy that basically took a sledgehammer to that cosmetics testing ban, because they had a policy that said, well, on the one hand, we've banned animal testing for cosmetics, but on the other hand, we're going to still allow it under a different regulation. So all in the EU, all chemicals that are sold there, they have to be registered under what we call the REACH regulation. And under this particular regulation, the European Chemicals Agency are the administrators of that regulation. And they said, well, cosmetics ingredients still need to be tested under REACH. And so you're banning it on one hand, but under the other hand, still allowing cosmetics to be tested.
But excuse me, Dr. Baines, but why would they want this dual system? Is it just sort of like covering your bases twice. I mean, it seems redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would they want to test these chemicals on animals after they've already banned the tests? And and some of these cosmetics and these chemicals have already been on the market for years.
Absolutely. They have essentially created an artificial divide because the European Commission and the European Chemicals Agency have said, well, the cosmetics testing ban, that only applies to consumers. That the cosmetics regulation was designed to protect consumers. It wasn't ever designed to protect the health and safety of workers making those ingredients. And so they said, well, under REACH, we still need to assure the safety of those manufacturing those ingredients. And so that's why we're going to still allow these tests. So it's justifying it for this one particular reason, which is for worker health safety, which is an important reason. Of course, we want workers to be safe, but testing ingredients on animals isn't going to achieve that particular aim.
So this is going to create, I guess, if you're a worker, you should be a little happy that they're concerned about your safety, although these products and these chemicals have already been established as safe already, and people have been producing them. If you're a worker, you've been producing these chemicals and these products for years.
Yes, some of these ingredients have been on the market for decades.
Yeah.
So not only have people been putting them on their skin for many, many years, workers have been safely handling them in factories for decades as well. And these tests that are being requested are not because there's a particular health concern. It's not that something has been, a red flag has suddenly been raised to signify a concern, because the way the REACH chemicals regulation works, it's very much like a checklist of tests that need to be ticked off to say, okay, you've completed every checkbox, you're now allowed to market this ingredient. And so what the regulators are doing is going down and looking at this list thinking, we've got a checkbox here that's not being ticked. We need that data. And so the ingredient suppliers, you need to go get that data for us. And that requires a new test on animals. It doesn't matter that ingredient's been around for so long.
I guess you're arguing that it's not necessary to have any kind of second list if you have an existing list or existing knowledge that these chemicals or products aren't harmful to people or to workers or people handling them.
And this is what is putting the ingredient suppliers in a very, very difficult place, because, of course, they want to be able to market their ingredients safely. They're being put between a rock and a hard place, saying, well, you need to generate this new data, even though there's not a specific real safety need for that data. We still need that data. And so that is why the PETA Science Consortium has actually been helping some of the companies that have been appealing against having to do these tests, because they don't want to have to do these tests.
Well, what kind of purpose would this data serve? I mean, it would just be something they could file away and to protect against overall liability. I guess that would be the issue.
That is essentially it. It really is ticking a box to say, okay, you're now compliant with this chemicals regulation. You've given us all of the data that we require, so we can now file that one away, and you can go ahead and market that particular ingredient and carry on as you have been doing.
Now, you say it's like ticking off a box. However, it's not as simple as that, I imagine. I mean, this must involve a long battery of tests, not just one, and also a large number of animals that would have to be
absolutely subjected. The kind of tests that are being requested are often reproductive toxicity tests, and these are the kind of tests that for just one substance, one test can involve the use of over 1,000 animals. And so if you look at the ingredients industry that may have hundreds of particular ingredients that are only ever used in cosmetics, all requiring this kind of data, the potential for animals' lives is absolutely astronomical. We know just from a couple of cases that we've been involved in, companies appealing against these tests, it's involved tests that have requested over 5,500 rats and rabbits to be used. And that's just 2 ingredients.
That have already been largely proven to be safe, and now you're killing thousands of animals.
Yeah, so under the cosmetics regulation, it's been shown to be safe for consumers to use these ingredients in products. And yet under this other regulation, they're still requiring these additional tests on animals.
So what is the concern that consumers in the UK and the US should have? I mean, this is an issue in the European Union, which is, I guess, Germany, Italy, France. Those would be the biggest that come to mind. But what about consumers in the UK, which is now separate from the EU and the US? Why should they be concerned about what's happening in the European Union?
There's a couple of really good reasons. One was the testing ban that was brought in Europe basically acted as a blueprint globally for how cosmetics are regulated around the world. So we've seen in many, many other countries, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, for example, all of those countries have looked at what is it Europe has been doing, and they have mirrored very similar legislation in their own areas. But also there's a second reason, because what happens under the REACH chemicals regulation can affect companies internationally. It's not just confined to Europe, because if you want to import an ingredient into Europe, then you need to comply with this particular piece of legislation. And that affects companies from India to Taiwan to the US to the UK, because many, many companies are importing. And so those ingredients that could be used across the world are going to have been potentially tested on animals. So it really does have a knock-on effect. It's potentially destroying the cruelty-free industry. That's what this has the potential to do, because they are asking for ingredients even that are not used for any other purpose other than in cosmetics to be tested on animals. And there's only a finite number of those ingredients, and they're used worldwide, but being tested under this EU regulation. And so companies who are cruelty-free, who have pledged never to test on animals for any reason whatsoever, they are either having to look at reformulating their products where these REACH testing requirements are coming in, or leave these ingredients completely out now. And so it's becoming more and more difficult now for cruelty-free companies to try and avoid these particular ingredients.
Yeah, and so for a consumer in the UK or the United States, if you demand a cruelty-free product, you may not be able to get one now if this law goes through. If the requirement goes through.
Yeah, so this is a requirement that's already happening. The animals are dying now. These tests are already being requested. And so it really is a case that you need to be very, very careful as a consumer about your shopping habits. And REACH is having this enormous knock-on effect worldwide.
So you're saying that you're trying to work, or PETA's working with companies because they don't want to have to go through these extraneous tests, these unnecessary tests, but are necessary by law. So how are you helping these companies, and what kind of workarounds exist?
So ever since 2014, we leapt straight into action when we heard that this was the policy that was going on. And we've been helping companies in their appeals against doing these tests. We've written to legislators. We've talked to policymakers. We even had an EU ombudsman complaint submitted. We've enlisted cruelty-free brands as well. We had over 450 cruelty-free brands sign an open letter to ECHA and the European Commission saying that this should basically just not be happening. But we've got to the point where we are still at a stalemate. And this has really brought us to where we're at now, which is the Safe Cruelty-Free European Citizens Initiative. And what this Citizens Initiative is essentially it's a mechanism that allows EU citizens to have a say in policy making within the EU. So it's a little bit different to just a normal petition that can end up going round in continuous circles. But this is a particular legislative tool, a mechanism that can be used by consumers, by citizens to sign, and it goes directly to the Commission to say, this is the action that we want to happen. And over 1 million people is what we're aiming to have sign this for it to be successful. If you have over 1 million people sign it, the Commission then are obliged to act.
So who could be against this? I mean, we know what the European Chemicals Agency wants. Who is goading them to say we need to stick to our guns and require these tests? What factions exist that would stand up to PETA and the people who want cruelty-free cosmetics?
This is simply the regulators kind of interpreting how the REACH regulation interplays with the cosmetics regulation. It really has come down to an interpretation of the law, and we see it with two very different sets of eyes. So there's no one goading ECHA, the European Chemicals Agency, no one goading the Commission. It is coming directly from them. They're the ones that we are now having to stand up to and say, this has got to stop. And that's why we're mobilizing European citizens to go and sign this Citizens Initiative.
So this Citizens Initiative, if you get the 1 million signatures, you can present it to the EU and they would be compelled, because of the number of citizens saying this is what we want, they would have to give in to their desires and wishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of the way a European Citizens Initiative works, then if you get 1 million validated signatures, that means they're going and checking that whoever signs is who they say they are. And then they're compelled to act, and they have to listen to what these 1 million citizens are demanding.
So I imagine it's not just PETA UK out there trying to find or trying to get these signatures, but also the companies must be working to trying to get the people to sign.
Yes, so PETA joined forces with a number of other animal protection organisations, but also we had 2 brands in particular that have helped us launch this Citizens Initiative. So that's Dove and The Body Shop. So 2 brands that are certified as being animal test free.
What is your projection in terms of, can it happen? And if it does happen, what is the time frame for maybe making sure that these extraneous tests do not continue?
So we have 1 year in which we are allowed to attempt to try and collect the 1 million validated signatures. We started at the very end of August, and already we've managed to collect 250,000, just over 250,000 signatures already. So we're making fantastic strides, but it is so essential that we do this faster than in just a year, because these tests are happening now. The quicker we can collect these signatures, the quicker we can try and put a stop to it.
And tell me again the kinds of tests that take place. What kinds of tests are we talking about? What is done to the animals?
So in reproductive toxicity tests, the kind which are the common kind of tests that are being requested at the moment, you are talking about dosing force feeding a rabbit for a number of weeks. It can be up to 10 weeks. And that is then before she is forced to mate with a male who is also being dosed and force fed a particular substance, an ingredient, for 10 weeks. And then throughout pregnancy, the female mother will continue to be force fed this ingredient every single day. And at some point in some tests, she will be killed just before she gives birth, 1 day before she's due to give birth. And her unborn pups then will be dissected and analysed. In other tests, she'll be allowed to give birth, and then her babies have to go through the same fate as she does. Now, they will then also be dosed this chemical every single day until they reach maturity, and then they'll be killed. And and these kinds of tests, just one, it can use over 1,000 animals to get the results
and then
they need.
you do it once and you don't have to do it again, I guess that's not really a consolation. We should not be testing on any of these animals.
No, because doing these tests on animals, for one, it's not just the impact it has on the animals themselves. Secondly, it's not going to help protect humans, because we are finding out what is happening to a rabbit's body or a rat's body when they are being force-fed a chemical. But in reality, their physiology, their biochemistry, their metabolism, their physiology, it's very, very different to a human. And they are being force-fed these ingredients at extremely high doses, far higher than what a human would ever be exposed to. And they're also being kept in very unnatural environments whilst these experiments are going on. And that can have a confounding impact on the results itself. So actually, the data you're getting out is not necessarily reliable, and it's not necessarily going to predict what will actually happen in humans. So this is what we're saying to the Commission. It's not just that these tests are unethical, they're unscientific. It's not going to get the data we need.
Well, it's interesting because they're saying we need this data bank, this new data, but the data is essentially irrelevant and illogical and hence unnecessarily wasteful. So
absolutely. I mean, the solution really is that if they need this data, then work with the experts, work to find ways to get data that is human relevant, that is reliable and will predict what happens in a human body. And if we don't have those tests now, then you suspend, if you really do have a concern about a particular ingredient, just don't use that ingredient and work with the companies and the scientists to make sure we get that data in an ethical and in a scientific manner. So actually we can find out what's going on.
Yeah, because the companies, they want to be cruelty free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they really do want to work with the regulators, because we do have a number of approaches that can potentially be used, what we call new approach methodologies. And this is where you can incorporate a number of different tests to help us figure out, well, what is the potential predictive toxic effect to the human body. So this might be using various in vitro tests, using human skin cells and tissues, but also using very, very advanced computer simulations to help us get this data. And by having all of this kind of battery of tests together, it can really build up the picture. And so companies are developing these new tests all the time. And it's just a case of working with the regulators so they understand the data that's being generated and how to be able to use that data for their regulatory purposes.
Yeah. So the companies want it. They want to make sure these better tests are used, not these old tests that harm animals. They want to stay cruelty-free, but more importantly, perhaps, the customers demand cruelty-free products.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look at the growth of the cruelty-free industry. It's massively a huge, huge industry now that's growing all the time. The interest that citizens have in cruelty-free products, in making these purchases, in being informed, but also the fact that within just a few months, we've had over 250,000 people already sign the Citizens Initiative, just shows that there is a massive demand to ensure that we still have a cruelty-free industry.
But is it possible, though, that people could be buying products that aren't cruelty-free because they're products that are tested right now on animals?
It is. Yeah, that consumers need to be very, very careful, because it is possible that within the product that they are buying, there's an ingredient that has been tested for the purposes of this REACH chemicals regulation. And really, the only way consumers can ensure that they are still buying, making cruelty-free purchases, is checking PTUS's Beauty Without Bunnies database, because that's an international searchable database. You can get a Beauty Without Bunnies app on your mobile phone to make shopping so much easier, and you can input a company name or a brand name into that, and it will tell you whether that company or brand has pledged to never allow their product or their ingredient anywhere in their supply chain to be tested on animals for any reason.
So once again, it's the Beauty Without Bunnies app, PETA US's Beauty Without Bunnies app, and it's available wherever you get your apps. You can just simply put in a company name and an ingredient and find out if it's still cruelty-free and if it's still good. But that's probably the best way that people can find out if their cosmetics are cruelty-free.
Yeah, absolutely, because PETA US are communicating to all of the brands that are on their cruelty-free list about these REACH testing requirements to make sure they understand that they're doing the proper checks with their suppliers. And so they are conforming to PETA's very rigorous standards to ensure that their products and their brands are 100% animal test free.
All right. So that's one thing they can do, consumers can do, people listening can do to find out if the brands are testing still or if they are still getting cruelty-free products. But what about the petition? If listeners are in the EU, or I guess you have to live in the EU to sign the petition, right?
Nearly. You don't, so long as you are an EU citizen, doesn't matter where you live, but so long as you are an EU citizen, then just go to savecrueltyfree.eu and you can help save the animal testing cosmetics ban.
So that's savecrueltyfree.eu, and that, again, is open to anyone who's a European Union citizen, but maybe, say, a permanent resident somewhere, or maybe like you can have a green card or a visa in the United States and be a EU citizen. You can vote or sign the petition, or anywhere in the world if you're an EU citizen. And you're looking again for a million people signing.
Yep, 1 million validated signatures, which is a huge undertaking. And if you are not an EU citizen, then share, because EU citizens are living everywhere. You know, we're not all just based within the EU. There's over 5 million EU citizens just living in the US. So just share it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, because you never know who might see that link of savecrueltyfree.eu, and then just keep promoting, keep sharing. That's what we say.
And it's you have about a year, you say.
Yeah, we have a year, but the quicker we can do it, the faster we can attempt to save the animals and stop them from being used in these tests that are ongoing now.
All right. Dr. Julia Baines, PETA UK Science Policy Manager, thank you for being on the PETA Podcast.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much.
Dr. Julia Baines, PETA UK Science Policy Manager. She spoke to us from London. Once again, to find out whether your cosmetics are truly cruelty-free, get PETA's Beauty Without Bunnies app today. And if you're a European citizen and can sign the petition, get more information at PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMILAMOK. Or see my vlog at AMOK.com. Or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.